The briefing is brought to you in association with Spain. From the wilds of the Atlantic to the warmth of Mediterranean isles, the Spanish coast has something for every occasion. And whether chartering a yacht or renting a more modest motorboat, there's no better way to explore this magical country's lesser-known highlights than from the open water. Listen out for a new summer season of The Concierge on Monocle Radio. Join Robert Bound and friends as they turn navigator for an unforgettable journey along the Spanish coast. From hidden gems to legendary gastronomy, and with the unique drama of the America's Cup in the host city of Barcelona added to the mix, discover why the time is right to take to the waves. The Concierge, returning to Monocle Radio in July. This summer, set sail for Spain.
You are listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 13th of August 2024 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme, Ukraine claims to control 1,000 square kilometres of Russian territory. But can they hold it? And will it change the course of the war? Elon Musk is off the political fence once and for all with an interview of Donald Trump. Can he help get the former president's campaign back on track? Also ahead.
I'm Ed Stocker, Monocle's Europe editor at large, based in Italy. And today I'll be talking about why the country is selling off 33 historic buildings in order to raise money.
More from Ed a little later. We'll also get a roundup of the latest business headlines. And finally, we'll get a preview of the Edinburgh Art Festival with its director, Kim McAleese.
I feel like I've learned a lot about women and Scottish women and females and feminist practice in this place.
All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. It's been an extraordinary week on the battlefield for Ukraine as a surprise attack on Russia's own territory has yielded some pretty big gains. The country's top commander claims Ukraine now controls some 1,000 square kilometers of Russian territory, an impressive number, symbolically at the very least, but the question does remain whether this will have any tangible effect on the outcome of this war. Ukrainian journalist Olga Tokarek joins us now from Chernivtsi in southern Ukraine. Olga, how reliable are these claims, first of all, of the territorial gains? There are some disputes and questions about just how far Ukraine has gotten.
Hello, Chris. Well, we know for sure that Ukraine has managed to occupy some territory inside Russia. That's for sure. We just don't know how much of that territory. Russian officials yesterday, during the meeting with Putin, the governor of Kursk region, admitted that Ukraine holds about 22 villages and towns. That's the figure they provided. Ukrainian analysts' calculation is that it is at least 40. Yesterday, as you mentioned, the Commander-in-Chief Syrsky spoke about 1,000 square kilometers of Russian territory currently controlled by Ukraine. There is no possibility to independently verify this figure. But as I said initially, it is clear that Ukraine is holding quite a big part of Russian territory in this bordering Kursk region, and that Ukraine has made significant gains also in over the past week since it started this very surprise raid.
And what sense do you get, Olga, of where we stand at this moment, whatever the territorial gains may be in terms of the amounts? Do we believe that Ukrainian forces are still pushing forward at this moment, 1 week into this incursion, or are they starting to sort of consolidate their gains at this point?
Well, I must say that, being inside Ukraine and watching how this all this operation was discussed, or rather wasn't discussed in the Ukrainian media by Ukrainian officials, this is something very new. There were a lot of expectations last year, a lot of hopes related to Ukraine's counteroffensive, a lot of speculation, a lot of talk, a lot of debate. So when this very unexpected Kursk operation, Kursk raid started, there was surprisingly very little coverage in the media, and also very little, statements, very few statements coming from Ukrainian officials. Just yesterday, for the first time, President Zelensky admitted that Ukrainian forces are actually on Russian territory, are in Kursk region. And it is, very, very kind of different from how it used to be before. And also, I think, kind of signifies this change in Ukrainians' tactic, not to talk too much, not to raise expectations, but then conduct this very surprised, asymmetric operation and make everyone kind of guessing and wondering what Ukrainians' goals are, what are they planning to do, why are they doing that? So, I don't want to kind of pretend that I know more than there is in the public domain. I just, kind of from my observations can share that yesterday I was on the bus with the Ukrainian military who are undergoing some treatment in a hospital here in Chernivtsi in the southwest of Ukraine. And this military, men, they said that people from their battalion actually are now in Kursk region, and they were themselves surprised about this operation. So they said, we didn't know this is going to happen, and we've learned that our comrades, our people from our battalion are now in Kursk region, and it's something that it was really surprising even for the Ukrainian military themselves.
It is pretty incredible the way you describe that, Olga, just the secrecy that was involved in this. If we don't know what the goals are at the moment, do we know anything more about kind of the decision-making that went into this? I mean, Russia presumably believed that Ukraine would never dare enter its territory, which is, I suppose, why they were caught off guard.
Yeah, I think that's the point. And that was something that we also can deduct from yesterday's President Zelensky statement. He said, Putin wanted and brought war to others, but now it's coming home. So basically what he says is that Russia is not immune to, other countries retaliating and bringing war to itself, the war that it started. And I think, regardless of what are the official goals, what is the kind of the military operation and thinking the strategy behind it, we don't know about it, right? But what we already kind of can say, what this operation has achieved, there are several kind of several goals that I think have already been achieved. So first, to make this very surprise asymmetric move, shift attention from Donbass, where Ukraine is slowly losing territory, possibly stretch Russian forces so that they might be forced to, transfer those troops and those units that are currently advancing in Donbass to defend Kursk or try to take back Kursk region. Then another goal is obviously to undermine Russian army and Putin's legitimacy, to show, Russia is not as scary. And also the West's fears of escalation might not materialize. Russia failed for a week to admit that this incursion was taking place at all. Russian propaganda and Russian officials, they kind of try to play it down, say, well, nothing is really happening. Ukrainian units have been defeated. But now it became impossible for them to hide that actually Russia has lost territory to the Ukrainian forces. They've been forced to admit it. Putin was forced to admit it. And I think it's a severe blow to, his own legitimacy in the eyes of his population.
Olga Tokarczuk there, I believe, in Ukraine. We will move on from there. That was the Ukrainian journalist Olga Tokarczuk. And now here's Monocle's Carlotta Ribello with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is in Moscow today, where he will be meeting with Russia's leader Vladimir Putin. It is expected that the two will discuss the situation in the Middle East as the conflict between Israel and Palestine continues to escalate. Abbas will then travel to Turkey tomorrow for talks with President Tayyip Erdogan. Venezuela's opposition coalition has called for protests around the world to be held this Saturday in the show of support of its claim to have won the country's presidential election. President Nicolás Maduro was declared a winner by the government-controlled Electoral Commission, but the opposition has maintained that its candidate Edmundo González was the real winner of the poll. And South Korea has deployed a sniffer dog to detect bedbugs after the Olympic Games in Paris. A 2-year-old beagle named Seko is the only dog in the country trained to sniff out the pheromones emitted by the insects. Flights arriving directly from Paris are being disinfected once a week, compared with the normal rate of once a month. And the airport quarantine service is being prepared to swing into action if an outbreak is detected. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Carlotta. The tech entrepreneur turned social media owner turned political cheerleader Elon Musk yesterday interviewed Donald Trump on his own platform X. It was not the smoothest of starts with a 40-minute delay, but with some 1 million people reportedly tuning in at any given time over the course of 2 hours, it does highlight the power that Elon Musk has over this U.S. presidential race and the man that he has officially endorsed to win it. Well, I'm joined now for more on this by Washington reporter H.J. Mai. H.J., let's start with these technical difficulties and the 40-minute delay. Elon Musk claims that X was subjected to denial of service attacks, hacks basically. Is there anything to back that up?
Nothing that we have seen officially so far besides his claims. I bet there will be, somebody trying to figure out what exactly happened. Right when the conversation started, obviously Musk apologized for the delay. And, he immediately said that those attacks were carried out by people who, don't want to listen to former President Trump. So he clearly made this a political attack. But no, there's nothing official that would back those claims up so far.
So 40 minutes in, we did get to the actual interview. And HJ, before we continue, let's hear some audio of Elon Musk's endorsement.
You are the path to prosperity, and I think Kamala is the opposite. I may get attacked like crazy, and, I've also experienced quite a bit of lawfare myself, but I'm just trying to tell people my honest opinion, and I haven't been really active in politics before, and I'm just trying to point out that my track record historically has been moderate, if not moderate, slightly left. So this is to people out there who are in the moderate camp to say, I think you should support Donald Trump for president. And I think it's actually a very important junction in the road, and we're in deep trouble if it goes the other way.
HJ, listening to that, it is interesting the way that Elon Musk phrases this for himself, the fact that he is getting off the political fence. And he has been involved in politics for some time now, despite his claims there that he wasn't really before this. But how significant is this endorsement from Elon Musk in both the words and in financial terms?
Well, I think, the words have some weight, I think. Given, Elon Musk has been, revered now for the past, decade or so, at least, with his, CEO of Tesla, he's the CEO of SpaceX. He's obviously the owner of X, formerly Twitter. So there's definitely an endorsement like this carries some weight. There are people out there, who only drive Teslas because, Elon Musk is the one behind the company. So there's definitely some weight, and Trump obviously hopes that he can, win those people that you would not consider to be initially maybe Republican voters. But I think, for Trump, the potential money, the potential backing that comes with having, Elon in his corner, I think that's even more appealing to the Trump campaign. You've probably heard all of those reports that, he wants to take millions and support the Trump campaign. He has denied that. I think there were reports of that he wants to donate up to $45 million. He has denied those reports by the Wall Street Journal. But I think this is really, significant in some circles. At the same time, you have seen over the past several weeks also pushback. Elon has come out for Trump right after the assassination attempt. And there was this German drugstore chain, who decided that they don't want to buy any Teslas anymore for their company fleet because of his comments and, posts that he just spreads on his social media platform X that are clearly, disinformation and fake posts when it comes to the Democratic ticket, when it comes to especially Kamala Harris, the, obviously Trump's opponent going into November.
Well, and on that point, HJ, this was a chance also for Donald Trump to kind of reclaim the narrative after, a strong few weeks for Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz. Did he land in this 2-hour interview, which was frankly focused mostly on him, but did he land on anything that could be effective in terms of changing the momentum and attacking the Democratic ticket?
No, not really. This was really what we've heard, when you've seen him on the campaign trail. This are the same attacks that he has, thrown out there against Joe Biden, now against the Harris-Walz ticket. There was nothing new in this whole conversation. There was no sign of unity that he promised after the assassination attempt. He used some inflammatory words during the conversation. I think there was maybe one interesting aspect is that it seems like, Elon, in the short period of time during their relationship, has already gotten to him as he has softened his stance. It seems a little bit on the EV mandate that's here in the US, even though, his slogan at every campaign is still drill, baby, drill. And he wants, more fossil fuels being produced by the country. There's definitely something that Elon has gotten to him, and it might shift his policies should he win. But was there anything new? Not at all. This was the same attacks. There was nothing policy focused. It was just how bad this country would be, according to him, should Democrats win another term in office, and that there would be more crime in the country. The borders would be wide open. Immigrants would come in, and it's the same thing that we've been hearing for years.
Washington reporter H.J. Mai, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio. I'm Chris Chermak. To Italy, which has long had an issue with spiraling public debt, and to help clear up its finances at least a little bit, is going to be offering lucky and wealthy buyers the opportunity to own a castle in the country. That's right, the Defense Ministry in November will sell off 33 sites, castles, villas, army barracks that it owns or manages, and by all accounts not very well. Many of these castles will be labeled solidly in the fixer-upper category for anyone who does choose to buy them. I'm joined now by Monocle's Europe editor-at-large, Ed Stalker, for more on this. Ed, let's start with kind of the hard news aspect of this. How bad is the debt situation in Italy that we've come to this point?
It's pretty bad, Chris, to be honest with you. The IMF warned Italy back in May about its debt and its slow spending of EU funds that it received post-COVID. Obviously, it's a complicated situation, and it's something that this government, to be fair to it, hasn't inherited. The debt crisis, if you like, in Italy stretches all the way back to the 1980s, but it is projected to be 140% roughly of gross domestic produce by 2026. So these are worrying numbers, amongst the highest in Europe. It's sort of battling with Greece for that top spot. And so the Italian government has taken this decision. This is Giorgia Meloni from Fratelli d'Italia, the Prime Minister, her decision to do this sell-off. It was announced last year. And the idea is to try and raise 20 billion euros through these sales by 2026. Of course, the question still remaining is how much that will sort, if you like, Italy's debt crisis, given it's the heavy burden, if you like, of its pensions and also other schemes that the government has introduced that have weighed heavily on the debt. But it will at least potentially help a little bit, Chris.
And how is this going down in Italy, if I could ask? I do remember this from, the debt crisis in Greece. There was always, at that time back in 2012, also this issue of various things that they had to sell off, were forced to sell off. This is being done by Meloni herself. How is it going down with the public?
Well, a lot of them are on the beach, so maybe they're not too worried. I joke. But, if you look at the list of the buildings, you touched upon it in your intro. There's a castle near Naples from the 16th century that was built for Charles V. There's a lighthouse on Elba Island where, of course, Napoleon was, palaces and villas in Florence and Padua. So it's quite an impressive, if you like, list of patrimony, and belonging to, the Ministry of Defence. They may get the money that they need, but of course there have been reactions from conservation groups. The principal one here in Italy is FAI, and they sort of condemn this decision due to the historic importance of the buildings. And, the question remains, could a body like UNESCO step in and somehow save these? Could they be added to lists? Could funds come from the European Union to help save them? But of course, Italy has its eyes on raising this money. And it needs to be noted, Chris, so obviously this is the thing that has raised a lot of headlines because of the types of buildings in question, but it's part of a bigger plan. Italy has already sold off a big stake in ITA Airways to Lufthansa, raising over 300 million there. And they're also earmarking sort of major, if you like, Italian institutions, the Post Office, Poste Italiane. They may be selling a part in that. They're even looking at the train provider Ferrovie dello Stato, which of course runs Ferrorossa, the high-speed trains, the energy company Eni as well. They're not looking to sell off majority stakes, so they would still remain public. But by selling a small stake, they could also raise money. So by no means the only thing is these buildings we're talking about today, Chris.
And when you talk about some of the criticism there from heritage groups, I guess the question then is what kind of people are expected to buy these properties, and will there be any kind of conditions on them, whether it is, that they have to renovate them, keep them open to the public, treat them as some kind of public good to, I guess, tampen down on some of that frustration from heritage groups?
Yeah, I think that really remains to be seen. The Ministry of Defence said they're looking for, they look forward to proposals for real estate development, value enhancement and management. So I think that gives you some idea of what they're looking at. So obviously that suggests that they're looking for people who are, willing to sort of be there long term and actually enhance these buildings. But in terms of the people who will step in, we'll have to wait till November when they go under the hammer, as it were, and we'll find out who's interesting and stepping up and paying what will probably be pretty hefty price tags. People with large pockets and, as we mentioned before, who are willing to spend what will in many cases amount to a large amount of money in terms of renovation, which is why I guess the Ministry of Defence is talking about, uses words like redevelopment and value enhancement, because it won't be an easy task and it will take a lot of work, I think.
Step up in November if you have the money and patience. Monocle's Ed Stalker in Milan, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing, and it's time now to get the latest business headlines with Bloomberg's Ewan Potts. Ewan, always good to have you on the show. And over the last couple of weeks, we have seen this sort of bumpy ride, haven't we, between economic news and the stock market response to that. You have some good news for us today from right here in the UK.
Yeah, blimey, it's certainly been bumpy. Yeah, an unexpected drop in the UK unemployment numbers today. This is for the spring quarter. The rate fell by 0.2 percentage points to 4.2%. Economists have been expecting a small rise in UK unemployment. But in fact, companies are hiring at the strongest pace since last November, the economy adding 100,000 jobs over those 3 months. Now, just to give you a bit of historical context, unemployment's been at a pretty low level in the UK since the pandemic, bubbling around about the 4% mark. But it had been ticking up in the last couple of readings, and that was the expectation, is that it would continue going up. Of course, this is a good news story, but this is also a bit of a problem for the Bank of England. You often get this with good economic data because the Bank of England has signalled that more rate cuts are on their way. We've had one interest rate cut from the Bank of England, bringing them down from that high level we've had to attempt to get inflation under control over the last couple of years. But there's also separate data on wage growth. That has cooled from 5.8 to 5.4%. So that's useful for the Bank of England. It's concerned that wages are rising much faster than prices. A lot of settlements in the public and private sector coming in above inflation, and that's something which troubles the Bank of England. So that is useful for it. But yeah, some unexpected strength in the labour market. Interesting to contrast the situation with the US, where there's been a lot of weak jobs data over the last few months. That was one of the triggers for all that turbulence, which you referenced in your question, which really rattled markets. We had that bad jobs reading from the United States. So the US labour market is definitely cooling. It also puts the UK in a better position than many parts of the euro area, not least Germany, which are barely growing at all. So for once, the economic picture in the UK is looking pretty rosy, really.
Yeah, it gives Keir Starmer a few bragging rights, even if he wouldn't necessarily have something to do with it yet. But on the other side, that is sort of the positive news globally. But you do also have some other negative news for us when it comes to the stock market sell-off. It's still going on in China.
Yeah, share transactions in China sank to their lowest level in over 4 years yesterday, really since the early days of the pandemic. But it's not just share volumes, it's also share prices. China's benchmark CSI 300 is now down by more than 3% so far this year. And that makes it the worst performer amongst the world's major equity gauges. Of course, over the last 12 months or so, stocks have really been on a tear, particularly in the US, but also in Europe as well. Stocks have been in very buoyant form. Here in the UK market is back in fashion. The market is one of the best performers over the course of this year. But China and Hong Kong have just not been catching this at all. Trading volumes in Hong Kong have done a little bit better than their mainland counterparts, but they've also been contracting in recent days. And separately, foreign investors pulled a record amount of money from China last quarter. China's direct investment liabilities dropped almost $15 billion over the course of the spring. It's only the second time this figure has turned negative. And should that decline continue for the rest of the year, it would actually be the first annual net outflow of investment money from China since at least 1990. So no let up as far as we can see for the exodus of cash from China.
Ewan, thank you very much. That was Bloomberg's Ewan Potts. This is The Briefing. And finally, here on The Briefing, the Edinburgh Art Festival is celebrating 20 years this year. It opened this weekend with a huge range of institutional exhibitions and commissioned works across the city, from a light installation by the London artist Prem Sahib to a Scottish-focused restaging of the Tate show Women in Revolt. Art journalist Amma Rose Abrams spoke to the festival director Kim McAleese this weekend and began by asking about this year's programme in the context of Edinburgh's art scene.
I mean, I think Edinburgh is a really interesting cultural city, and in terms of visual art, museums, galleries, exhibition spaces, we have a lot that there is to offer for audiences come in, and that ranges, it's quite broad ranging actually. We have an amazing National Museum, we have national galleries that span across 5 different sites, then we have really interesting contemporary art venues like the Fruit Market, the Talbot Rice Gallery connected with the university. And then further into Leith, we have really interesting, more kind of experimental artist-led spaces. We have the Edinburgh Sculpture Workshops, which are just a wonder to behold for anyone who's really interested in making or has a practice kind of rooted in sculpture. All of the cultural spaces span the city itself, so it's not just all centrally located. And there's a really kind of multidisciplinary offer, I think, in terms of artists and spaces.
Yes, and you have the wonderful Women in Revolt show.
We do. Oh, that show. Chris O'Feely as well. Yeah. There are so many incredible institutional shows, like you mentioned, the Women in Revolt show, which was launched at Tate Britain. It's been kind of reframed and rehung here, where there's a really interesting kind of focus on a lot of the Scottish or Scotland-based women in that exhibition. And that for me has been it's been really incredible actually looking, like I feel like I've learned a lot about women and Scottish women and females and feminist practice in this place. The Chris O'Feely work obviously is incredible. Dovecot are a wonderful institution who work with a whole range of artists in a very technical but also very responsive way, very contemporary way, with lots of contemporary artists.
And then complementing those shows, you have a commissioned programme of, you could say, more emerging artists, younger artists. Could you talk me through some of the commissions for this year?
Of course. I think that's fair to say that we are working with more kind of early career emerging artists. Some artists are a bit more established, but maybe they've never shown in a Scottish context before. One thing I will say about the festival-led programme, running very closely alongside the partner programme that we just talked about, is that a lot of the work emerges from social justice, and a lot of those artists are very engaged in, I was going to say those ideas, but I suppose they're very much engaged in different movements, or they're very responsive to socio-political changes within the world and dynamics within the world. The City Art Centre is our base for the year, where we're sat right now, and I find it quite interesting because it's an institution in Edinburgh, and but what I mean by that is not just like an institution. It has like a long-standing history of being a civic building and is run by the City of Edinburgh Council. So to have lots of artists engaged within those kind of thoughts and debates in this very prominent space just opposite Waverley Station, Edinburgh Waverley Station, which is the train station. For those of you who maybe haven't been, I thought it was quite important to have a lot of those kind of more early career artists and that work in the space. So we have Platform, which is our Emerging Artist Award. So there's 4 Scotland-based artists who are part of that. We also have 2 solo shows, one by an artist called Renee Helena Brown, who has a really gorgeous kind of reflective moving image work about their kind of background growing up in Donegal in the north of Ireland. And we also have a beautiful archival show by an artist called Karol Radziszewski, which is a co-commission with a space that I adore in London called Auto Italia. And it's an archival show and a body of work about unseen queer histories behind the Iron Curtain throughout the 70s, 80s and 90s.
Of course, it's not only the 20th anniversary of the festival, it's your second year.
It is.
As director. So how does that feel going into your second year? How does it compare to the first year? And what is it like to be quite young in your job here, but working with this amazing landmark event of the 20th birthday?
I mean, last year, obviously my first curated festival, there were a lot of things that I tweaked and changed ever so slightly, and I mentioned just there the format where there's a focus on weekends of events, a lot of social justice based work that was being shown kind of for the first time. So I've really continued a lot of that into this year. Does it feel different? One thing that I will say that I think is quite important is the context that we're operating in within this year. If I think about the past 12 months, there's been quite a lot politically that's changed within the UK, a change in government. We have quite a hostile environment in public space within the UK at the minute, so I think it's really important to acknowledge that.
Yes.
And obviously the ongoing crisis in Gaza. So I think the world feels. Oh, and the other thing I will mention, I suppose, the American elections, not least the rest of the elections all that are global at the moment. So it does feel like it's important to find moments of hope within that.
That was Amma Rose Abrams speaking with Edinburgh Art Festival director Kim McAleese. Events are running alongside the city's Fringe and Book Festivals from the 9th to the 25th of August, with some exhibitions extending beyond the festival month. And that is all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Carlotta Rebello. Our researchers were Gunnar Grunlid and Sana Jumani, and our studio manager was Flynn Simons. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.